Ugly, ugly, ugly. Pacers fall down 24 quickly. An incredible amount of turnovers, some terrible defense. They fall in Toronto. They're 9-13. Not much going right for this Pacers team right now, and we'll discuss it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, oh man, ugly, ugly game to discuss. Pacers fall in Toronto to the Raptors. They lose by 11. That looks close. They got it close. There was some good stuff in the second half that we will discuss. Encouraging stuff that makes you perplexed how they lose by 11 and have the first 30 minutes that they did. They had no soul, no heartbeat, no anything as a basketball team on their way to getting their butts kicked by a Raptors team that has a worse record than them, even though they do have some talent and caused some difficulties for the Pacers. It should not have been as comically easy for Toronto as it was, or as difficult for Indiana as it was. Turnovers, defense, what is going on with it? Like every non-Haliburton starter for much of the game, the bench kind of came alive. Haliburton looked good on the road. Like some stuff looked good, but it was an awful night for the Pacers. Soulless in many ways. To me, the standout thing for this game, and what I will remember this game for, is the turnovers the Pacers had was unbelievable. They had two in the first 2 minutes, both by Andrew Nembhard, who did not have a good start to this game at all. Then Myles Turner had one just before the 9-minute mark. And then Myles Turner had another one on the next trip right after grabbing an offensive rebound. 3 minutes and 13 seconds into this game, the Pacers had 4 turnovers. And they were down like 13-5 at one point or something. Like shooting 50%. They had made their only 3-point attempt. Like, oh, look, they're generating good shots, but they just aren't shooting because they don't have chances because they turned it over so much. It sunk them so much early. The Raptors are a turnover team. It's their thing. That's their biggest flaw as a team this year, is that they cough it up. And the Pacers had that many turnovers that fast. First quarter, the Pacers had 9 turnovers. The Raptors had 3. And the first quarter Pacers ball control was so bad that I actually went to StatHead and was looking up the most turnovers by the Pacers in a game and when it was and how many times they've had more than like 25, 30, whatever. Because I got to be ready with these stats. Like they're on this kind of pace. Not to be outdone by themselves, though. To start the second quarter. All right, chance to turn things around. Only down 8 after one quarter. The Raptors aren't blowing them out. They're making their shots. Oh, turnover 35 seconds into the second quarter. Oh, wait. Sorry, that was their second turnover of the quarter. They had 2 turnovers in the first 35 seconds. All 3 of their first possessions of the second quarter were turnovers. They had 12 in the first 11 minutes of the game. Then a goaltending turnover from Moses Brown on a made shot later in the quarter. And then I forget what their other one was, but they had 14 turnovers in the first 13 minutes of this game. 14 turnovers by halftime, to be clear. But it was over a turnover per minute for almost a quarter and a third of another quarter. You can't even possibly overcome that. You can't. And they were just bad, lazy, what are you doing turnovers. The first quarter of this game, the Raptors and Pacers each made 3 free throws. They both made 40% of their shots. The Raptors shot 48%. The Pacers shot 45%. The Pacers won the rebounding battle. The Pacers had 3 steals and did a lot of good stuff. And their star player was rolling with 9 points. And they were losing by 8. And they were down a bunch at halftime. That's how bad the turnovers were early in the game. There isn't a lot to say about turnovers. That's just like an adjustment. Stop. You can't say stop turning it over by doing these 3 things. Every team is trying to not turn it over all the time. This was just lazy, bad basketball. Brain farts, like the Moses Brown goaltender I already said, or offensive fouls that, did not need to be, screen set the way they were, or diving for the ball the way they were, passes that were just comical in nature at times, just like in a game like this where the turnovers kept stacking, they felt even worse than they were. And in the end of the game, the Pacers won the turnover battle. They cleaned things up. We'll talk about their second half spirit later. But that was just pathetic. And in a game that ended up being kind of close at times, 23 points off turnovers for the Raptors was just killer. Pacers had 17. I mean, that 6 points was a huge swing in a game this close. That was absolutely crushing for the Pacers early in this game. I actually think that for a couple stretches, the first quarter, they were defending okay, and that kept them in it. That vanished to me in the second quarter. In the second quarter, their turnovers got a little better, but their defense got much worse, just like cuts from nowhere. Barnes, Barrett, getting whatever they want. They cut off Pirtle, who was awesome against them last time, but they weren't really slowing down much of anybody else. First half Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are 29th in the NBA in three-pointers made per game entering this game. They make 10.9 per game. They made 10 in the first half. They made 55.6% of their shots, 10 threes. They ended up winning the rebounding battle at halftime. A team that is a turnover machine ended up losing the turnover battle 9-14. Pacers were ahead in turnovers at the break. Raptors had 14 assists. Pacers had 9. Haliburton was good and scored a lot. He didn't miss a shot in the second quarter. That's all, the first half. That is the end of the positive for the Pacers in the first half. They defended poorly against key Raptors players and non-key Raptors players. Couldn't cut off the threes. Many of them makes wide open. They turned the ball over like crazy. They looked like they had no chance. They looked helpless against the Raptors. Just horrible. And we will get to the positives later. I'm going to mention them very briefly right now to say from the middle of the third quarter till there was about 4 minutes to go. It's only about 15 minutes of the game. Less than that. The Pacers looked awesome. Some guys who were typically terrific last year were stepping up. Haliburton kept rolling. Guys who struggled the first half got going. Their defense was better. The rebounding was there. The pace, the tempo, the boom, the wow from last year was there. And I feel like that's a thing said a lot from people watching and talking about this team a lot is, oh, there's last year's team. And then it went away for the last couple of minutes. The clock was the Raptors' friend. We'll get to that. I only am bringing that stretch up right here to say the fact that was in that team tonight, the Pacers had that level in them. They had that style in them. They had that care, both taking care of the ball and that care like, hey, let's go do this thing in them. But it didn't come into play for 30 minutes. Just like that can't happen. The paying it's bad for the paying customer. That's bad for the results for your team. That's bad for your season's trajectory. Like they need wins. They're 9-13. Their 3-game losing streak from last week. See ya. They've already lost 3 in a row since then. They have shown no progress since. Their defense keeps getting worse and having just like, what are you doing moments. They weren't in the first half of this game. They improved defensively to their credit. In the first half of this game, they were not taking away anything again. And they were not pairing it with anything good besides Tyrese Haliburton. Turnovers, bad timing, tough shots, couldn't get anything going. The third quarter was awesome. 29 shot attempts in the third quarter. That's crazy. That'd be almost, for a full game, you'd be sniffing 120 if you did that. That would be unbelievable, right? They were playing fast. They were not turning the ball over, only won the whole third quarter. They took and made threes. They got rebounds and offensive rebounds, right? That level was in the Pacers tonight. I saw it. I watched the game. They can do that. They've done it at times this season. Everybody was calling it a fake comeback, and I was like, they look like this is a thing that was sustainable. And I would say it was not a fake comeback because they had the ball with a chance to take the lead at one point. They did come back, almost. But yet, none of that matters, and none of that should be the theme anyone takes away from this game. What anyone should take from this game is, holy cow, were they awful for 30 minutes against a team they have a better record than, although the Raptors now beaten them twice, so maybe that doesn't matter. Against a team that they need to beat because they need to keep up in the standings, and they're just not. Their last cup game, a chance to turn some things around after 2 just pathetic blowout losses by 20-plus to Memphis and Detroit. And instead, they came out so flat, could not take care of the ball, couldn't guard anybody, no cohesion. It's bad. This team has not been playing well all season. Even their stretch of 3 wins were against bad teams, banged up. They deserve credit for winning those games because that last year's Pacers don't win those games, and they needed the wins more than they needed the process. But that's why all week I was asking, are they turning the corner, or not saying it, because they didn't show that kind of progress. They didn't show a new level. They didn't blow anybody out. They were really fighting to get those wins. And then they got blown out by the best team they played at home to end it. And then they've lost 2 in a row to start this road trip. Critical trip. Their next, I've said this a million times, and for good reason, and they keep not taking advantage. The next 4 games are as critical as it gets for this team. I mean, if they are under 500 by the time and then they'll get the 2 games scheduled from the NBA Cup. That might have already been announced by the time you're reading this. I think it's coming out today, but I haven't seen it yet. They just can't. They can't do it. They can't turn things around, and they have a crazy hard road trip right after that, and they've been terrible on the road, and they play the champs and good teams, and it's time for them to do something, and they haven't. They just haven't. And this game was a chance for it, and they showed that they could have done it if they'd started some stuff earlier, but they didn't. And they have to live with that, and that shouldn't be how this is, but it is. This team is not playing well. They had no soul for 30 minutes of a game. And I have to figure something out. How did they turn it around? And what does that turnaround say about some of the stuff that I just talked about? And what did go well in this game? Believe it or not, some players in that turnaround showed some stuff that I think is important and goes back to conversations recently had here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get to any of that, though, we've been talking about 2 great groups of people. First up, the good people over at Game Time, the best way to get tickets to the sports, music, theater, comedy, whatever you're going to, you need tickets. Game Time is the place to get it. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. They filter out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. But if you do go through thousands of tickets, you will not be disappointed because they have a ton of amazing features that make the process totally worth it, like the seat views right in the venue before you buy, their lowest price guarantee, which is correct. They're toggling off hidden fees so you can see the price you're going to pay at the end. There's super deals and curated deals, everything you would want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets is on Game Time. So check it out, Game Time Picks, and download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Also need to tell you guys about PrizePicks, the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash, which you can now win with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get in on the action in sports in over 30 states. Real money sports action. And if you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. They have weekly promotions. For example, you think Steph Curry's going to have more than 5 3-pointers in his next game? You think Giannis is going to score more than 30 points? Cook up your hot takes with your friends. Win some real money this basketball season on PrizePicks. Hop on over, download the app today, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the PrizePicks app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Or second listen, Locked On Raptors. I love Sean Woodley. He's the best, one of my favorite people to talk to, who also does a Locked On podcast. And he'll talk about the Raptors, who are playing pretty good of late since Scotty Barnes returned from injury. Glasses Scotty Barnes, career high. Wow, that's crazy. A big win with a career high versus the Pacers. It never happens, does it? Sean Woodley will break it all down for the ascending, I suppose is the right word, Toronto Raptors. So the Pacers hit their low point of this game. Well, they were down 24 a few times. They hit their low point of this game when they were down 24 early in the third quarter, and it just felt helpless. I mean, I just explained it. They looked terrible in the first half. Nothing was going right. Like, they had to have a gut check kind of moment to have a chance in this one. I believe the last time they were down 24 was 60-84 with about 6.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. So that's that 30-minute mark I mentioned earlier where they just played awful for all that 30 minutes. By the end of the third quarter, it was much closer. They got it within 10. It was 84-93, right? So you can do math pretty quickly. It's a 22-7 run. All right. Good stuff for the Pacers. 26-7 run in that span. Huge stretch for the Pacers. They absolutely needed that to have a chance to come back in this game. And then in the early fourth, it looked a little rickety for a second, like their comeback was slowed, and then it got over double digits again. But then they roared right back. They got it. They went down 13. They got it to 9. They got it to 8. They got it to 5, 3, 2 after an Obi Toppin free throw. And they had the ball down 103-105 with 6 minutes to go. They had a chance to tie or take the lead in the fourth quarter of this game. Tyrese Haliburton missed a 3. It was a fine shot. He was awesome tonight. I don't care. And then immediately Ochai Agbaji hit a 3 himself. and the game was never close again. This will get registered as a clutch game, though, because it was within 5 in the final 5 minutes, even though it was not clutch by nature. But the Pacers roared back. They gave themselves a chance. They had the ball down 1 possession in the fourth quarter and got a good look during that trip, right? They played great for much of that stretch. What actually happened in the second half that was so great, especially after a terrible first half? The stretch that really got things going was the bench. This felt a little bit like the Pacers of last year in that way. 60-84 with 6:37 to go in the third quarter. Like I said, 61-84 after a Myles Turner free throw. Here they come, the typical duo. In comes Obi Toppin and TJ McConnell. The Pacers down 23. They were awesome in the third quarter. Obi Toppin dunked pretty quick after coming in on a pass from McConnell, and those two were playing on both ends. Obi Toppin was playing good defense with physicality and speed and aggressiveness, and McConnell was doing his thing, just flying into the lane and setting up his teammates. He only took 1 shot in this quarter, and it was awesome. 3 assists for McConnell in the frame with 1 rebound. No turnovers. Obviously, that's huge. Bennedict Mathurin had the only turnover for the Pacers in this quarter, and he was very good in this quarter too, Ben Mathurin was. So McConnell was awesome, getting the ball moving, popping, moving, defense, pressure. And then Obi Toppin, similarly excellent. They both played 6-11 in that quarter, and they were both plus 13. Obi Toppin, 2 threes, huge, after how he started the season from 3. 3 for 5 in general, 5 rebounds, a block, no turnovers. 8 points for him. Huge. Haliburton was very good in the third quarter. He was good all night, so this isn't a difference from their start, but he had 12 and 4 in just that quarter, right? That's a good game for a lot of players. He was great. He was hitting threes. He was moving well into the lane. He completely shook Jakob Poeltl for what I think was his best move of the season to get an open layup. Mathurin was 4 for 6 on his way to 8 points, right? Lots of guys stepped up in that quarter, but the turning point to me was that bench group coming in, McConnell and Toppin. And lo and behold, Pascal Siakam was a part of a lot of this. He came in with 3:15 to go, and the Pacers still down 18 at the time. And RJ Barrett was in the middle of free throw, so it became 19 immediately. And then they roared back in that final 3 minutes from down 19 to down 9. And Siakam was not – this might have been Pascal Siakam's worst game of the season. Like, statistically, it was not – he had some good moments. Like, he picked it up after a slower start. He didn't, like, fill up the stat sheet in that stretch. But it remains the case this season that when McConnell and Siakam are on the floor together, that's when the Pacers have been their best. Those two can pressure the rim and pressure an opponent on the ball with defense and just play in a way that is actually difficult for a team to defend, better than just about any duo on the Pacers this full season. So even though they specifically were not doing a ton down the stretch of this quarter, their just mere existence on the floor was a major part of this, right? In fact, I don't think Siakam scored at all in that stretch, and McConnell didn't score the full quarter. But they together have been everything for this team. And so Siakam goes 1 for 6 in the third quarter and is a +5 because he was a part of that big run, right? Like, that was a big part of this. And then in the fourth quarter, they kept going, but their best players were not there for them. McConnell was amazing. Early fourth, 5 for 5 for 12 points in the fourth quarter. He closed the game. You just heard Alex Gold and I talk about him playing with Siakam and playing potentially in these high leverage moments. He earned it. Toppin made his only shot in that quarter. He had 3 points, right? They did fine again. The bench kept the Pacers in it. But Haliburton, after an epic game from Tyrese Haliburton, we'll talk about that in the third segment, 1 for 5 in the fourth, including 0 for 3 from deep. He has usually been the opposite this season, right? Not a good road player, but hits the clutch shot when it matters. He's hit a bunch of clutch shots this year. Tonight was the opposite. 4 points in that fourth quarter. They needed more from him. Ben Mathurin, after a great third quarter scoring, 0 for 5 from him in the fourth quarter. They would have liked to have more from him. Siakam did hit his only shot in the quarter, but was struggling for most of the night. And they needed to rely on Myles Turner a lot. Toppin foul trouble was a story in this game as well. They tried Enrique Freeman at the 4 at one point. So they just didn't – they needed a little bit more from the guards, specifically Mathurin and Haliburton, late to get this done. I think the comeback fell short because the Raptors had such a big cushion that when they finally got Scotty Barnes back in after a big rest during the fourth quarter, that he just put the game away. He was terrific. Obviously, career high in scoring night. You're going to be terrific. He had 35 on 20 shots. But I think that was the difference to me, is those two guards didn't get it done late after being good in the third quarter. So the turnaround to me was the bench, right? Well, first of all, a couple things. The real turnaround thing for the Pacers in this game was turnovers. They had 6 in the second half. They probably, I don't remember when exactly their 6th turnover was. It was probably like 5 minutes into the game, right? They had 14 in the first 13 minutes. Just a disaster of turnovers. Clean that up in the second half. Great on the offensive glass in the second half. And everyone's going to say they lost the rebounding battle. Yeah, the Raptors made a bunch of shots. There were no rebounds for them. They did fine on the glass to me in this game. But they did well in the glass in the second half. They made threes in the second half in a way they didn't in the first half. They made twos in the second half at a pretty good rate, but not quite good enough. Everything that was bad in the first half, they cleaned up. They had some defensive lapses still. That was the thing they couldn't clean up, and that's obviously been a huge problem for them this year. But it proved it. Like, they could have, that was there. That level of the Pacers was there tonight. But it didn't show up until way too late, and they lose a game that they could have won against a team that they can beat. The second half Pacers looked awesome. 63-57, they win the second half. The 63, of course, being critical. Made 8 threes, had 12 assists on 23 makes, got to the foul line 9 times, like just looked really good. And it was such a striking change. So I think the turnovers was obviously a big part of it. The bench was the other big part, right? Toppin and McConnell were so good in the third quarter. Obi Toppin, maybe his best game of the season. Like, he's had better scoring games. He finishes this one with 15 in 15 minutes. He was plus 17, right? He was obviously awesome. But in the first half of that 15, he had 4. And he only played 4 minutes, right? They couldn't have him out there. They were defending that poorly, and they needed to try something else. They tried, like I said, Enrique Freeman at the 4 for 2.5 minutes. They tried Moses Brown. That did not go well, right? They needed to try other things because Toppin wasn't effective in the first half. And he had 2 fouls. The foul trouble also pulled him out of there. And McConnell in the first half was 0 for 4 with the 1 turnover, no assists. 1 turnover, no assists, 0 for 4 for TJ McConnell in the first half. That's so unlike him, but it happened. And it just is like it's perfectly emblematic of what the Pacers were in this game. They just didn't have it at all for 30 minutes. And once the bench got going and once they cleaned up the turnovers, they looked way better. But it was too late. It was much too late. Haliburton and his awesome night, which we're about to talk about, can only carry them so far. And the other thing I haven't said yet, the worst possible time for the worst Siakam game of the season. I mentioned that it was probably his worst game. 4 for 13 for him. 2 turnovers, minus 22 in his minutes. Usually it's the opposite. Usually he is the saving grace for the Pacers in games like this where no one else can get going. 4 for 13, 6 boards, 1 assist, 2 turnovers, 13 points on 13 shots. They needed him to be, if he was 6 or 7 for 13, that might win this game, right? Like, they just needed a little more from him. They didn't get it, and he didn't quite climb out of it like some other guys did. So a bad Siakam night, atrocious turnovers in the first half, bad defense for, I'll say, 40 of the 48 minutes, the bench picking it up too late, just too many things to overcome. And the reason those are things they have to overcome is because they're not playing well. The Pacers are not playing well. They're 9-13 for a reason. It's not because they're hurt. It's not because Haliburton's struggling was a big part of it, but it's not just because of that. It's not just because the bench has been worse. It's not just because they've been so inconsistent. They're just not very good right now. They're very close to the bottom 5 in defense. They're below average offense. It's not a good team. They have to figure something out. And if not, they're going to have to make some changes. We'll see on that conversation later this week because there was a good thing for Michael Scott I want to talk about later this week. Let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton to close out today's show. His awesome game, some other good stuff that I liked from this one, maybe a little bit of Nets talk because it's a back-to-back before we get you out of here on Locked On Pacers. Before we talk about any of that, though, got to talk to you guys about Chime. We've all been there spending more than we should during the holidays. Whoops. Well, take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no monthly or maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid 2 days early with direct deposit. You can learn more at chime.com/LockedOnNBA. Plenty of people have had an overdraft that they had to deal with that just was a complete accident or super annoying. Well, Chime lets you overdraft up to $200 with no fees. How about that? Your next deposit just applied to your balance. You get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. No monthly fees or maintenance fees, and over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. All great features for the millions of Chime members who are working on financial progress. Chime has spotted members over $32 billion in transactions through SpotMe. Friends give friends a boost, and eligible members on Chime get complimentary boosts and temporarily increase a friend's SpotMe limit. When you give a boost, they can boost you back. You got to check it out on Chime with their SpotMe features and many other excellent tools. Enjoy the holidays while keeping your financial goals on track with Chime. Open an account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by The Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC SpotMe eligibility requires and overdraft limits apply. Direct deposit timing depends on submission of payment file. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in SpotMe and are subject to monthly limits. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs and for OTC withdrawals. Let's finish up today's Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Check out Setting the Pace, Alex Golden's podcast, because he was on here yesterday and he's the best. And also check out Locked On NBA, because I'm about to record that with Wes Goldberg in about 45 minutes, which means I need to get going on watching some other games. I'm a little behind because the Pacers played, and I had a lot to talk about. I just realized my face is blurry, so you guys can't see that I look like a ghost. I've been working on my deck for the last 2 days. Waited until it was cold outside. That was smart of me to do, so I'm a little exhausted. I hope this is still entertaining. We're going to keep rocking, talking about Tyrese Haliburton. Speaking of entertaining, whoo-wee, did he look good scoring the ball in this game. And a rare, great road game for Tyrese Haliburton this season. I mean, much has been put into this home road splits. I'm not going to get into that specifically right now because everybody knows the stats by now. It's just been terrible, right? Very few of his good games have come on the road. His stats at home look like close to the guy from last year. His stats on the road look not like the guy from last year. Entering today, he had one road game over 19 points this season. That was the Dallas win. The Pacers maybe best quality win of the season. Obviously, Boston's very impressive, but at Dallas was a great game, and he was awesome that night, right? He has scored. Obviously, this was the Pacers' 23rd game of the season. 22nd? I can't do math. That was the Pacers' 22nd game of the season. Haliburton's 8 lowest scoring games, all on the road. That's crazy. He's been so much better at home than on the road this season. So he just had his third highest scoring outing in a road game. This was the first time he scored over 22 in a game this season that the Pacers lost, right? That's what makes this loss even more frustrating for the Pacers. They got good Haliburton on the road, and they still lost. He was tremendous. Bombing threes, getting to the rim, drawing fouls, could get by anyone. That's been his biggest thing this year, and part of why I had this theory about maybe he's hurt. Maybe that's why he's struggling, because he couldn't just shake guys like he did tonight a few times quite as often. It was impressive. He was great. Pulling up from deep, shooting around screens, flying to the rim, hitting the right guys on the passes. His timing was excellent. Really, really great Tyrese Haliburton game. Unfortunately for the Pacers, he played 40 minutes in a loss on the front end of a back-to-back. We'll see what that looks like tomorrow, because he was sensational in this game. And that is why I harped on, well, besides the fact that they looked soulless and terrible for 30 minutes, all the stuff that went wrong. They didn't need that much to go right to win. Haliburton was awesome, and the bench was good. Last year, that was a win like 80% of the time. and they got it. They got it in the second half and just had no chance. They were down so much they could not overcome it at all. It was close to their biggest comeback in franchise history. Well, at least in terms of if they had won the game. But they didn't. And Haliburton was that good. Other stuff that was fun. Myles Turner had some fun defensive moments. It's very hard to defend Jakob Poeltl pick and rolls and defend two guys and still block shots through him. He had 3 great blocks, 7 boards, 16 points. I liked his defense in this game. Apparently way more, by the way, than the fan base on the internet. A lot of people hated his defensive game. I didn't think Poeltl's buckets were his fault at all, the way they were having him scheme up in those. Someone's supposed to rotate behind him. It never happened. I thought Myles Turner had a really, really, really fun and entertaining game. Jarace Walker, not fun. A little bit closer to the guy we saw before the last 2 games. 0 for 5, 3 turnovers from Jarace Walker in this one. I mean, he's going to be their 8th guy. They need him to step up and do well. They did not go 9 deep in this game. No Quentin Jackson at all in this one, even with Nembhard only playing in the first half. So they just need Jarace Walker to be good to fill out a rotation, and he wasn't in this one. They needed him to be better. And Nembhard also struggled. Speaking of Nembhard, I mentioned his 2 turnovers early. He missed a bunny right at the basket at one point, missed a floater, missed a 3. Like, he ended up with 6 points on 5 shots because he got to the foul line. He had 4 assists. Like, he always does some decent stuff because of who he is, but not a particularly great game from him. And Ben Mathurin, he was so good in that third quarter. It makes you wonder if he could have gotten going earlier or if they could have found a way to get him rolling later, which this second one is kind of a team thing, kind of a him thing. Would have been great because in general, that stretch where he was at his best, the team was at their best tonight. But I think Haliburton, the biggest takeaway there, a good road game from him because he was good at home last week in a way that made everybody, including me, wonder, hey, could he actually be turning a corner? Could this be a thing that's possible? And then he had 8 and 7 in Memphis. So it's going to be important to see what he can sustain, because he was good enough that that should have been a high enough bar for them to win and probably win comfortably. And instead they lost because they just looked terrible for the first 30 minutes of this game. Speaking of looking terrible, my camera's been blurry for a long time. I can't fix it. So it's a good time to get you guys out of here. Tomorrow we'll be talking all things Pacers Nets. And then Thursday into Friday's episode, I'll have a guest. Friday, of course, I'll be in Chicago for Pacers Bowl, so a podcast after that game as well. Fun stuff coming, talking state of the team, talking some hoops about this Pacers team, even though they're not playing well. I hope you have fun listening to this podcast about the team. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. It's the easiest way to contact me. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day. See you very soon.